Justin Fields has trust issues right now. Maybe not in the exact way that might first come to mind for you, but it's what's holding back this Bears passing game right now. The good news is it is fixable, and our guest today is going to join us to break down that issue, what can be done to improve it, and how the Chicago Bears coaching staff can help this process along the way.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. You can join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for even more Bears talk. And make sure you hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making the Locked On Bears podcast your first listen today and hopefully every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. On the show today, we're going to be joined by Mark Schofield from SB Nation. If you've been a longtime listener of this podcast, you've heard him on many times over the years. He was a college quarterback. He's long studied quarterbacks in the NFL, and he's here to help us figure out what's going on with Justin Fields. He wrote a piece at SB Nation breaking down some plays from that game, so we'll kind of go through what he is seeing on the tape, what the problem seems to be, and what the Bears can do about it. I think it's a really good, fun conversation. We always get along well with Mr. Schofield. We get off the rails a little bit, but then we get into some really meaty, solid football analysis, and I don't think you can hear this level of Justin Fields breakdown anywhere else. I'm excited to get into it. Let's jump in. With us now is friend of the show, Mark Schofield, one of the great Twitter quarterback experts. He wouldn't call himself that, but I will. We always love relying on him for his quarterback knowledge. But of course, he covers the entire NFL as a writer now for SB Nation. He's been around the block. He's been covering quarterbacks for a long time. We've had him on to seemingly talk about every Bears quarterback at least the last half decade or so. And it's time to have the Justin Fields conversation, not the oh no, are we screwed conversation, but at least the check in and see what's going on. Things seem to be hitting the fan, and the timing worked out great. I reached out to Mark and was like, hey Mark, you've been watching Fields this season, you want to come on and talk about it? He goes, actually, I've got a piece coming out at SB Nation. So good timing, Mark, to have you on. First of all, how are things and sort of how have you been enjoying a weird start to this NFL season across the board?
Well, Lorin, it is great to be back with you. Always great to see you. It's great to get a few minutes to catch up before the show, one-to-one instead of at Veets with a massive crowd of people around us. But hopefully we'll get a chance to do that in a couple of months. It's been a strange season. I mean, it's been a really odd season to start. I mean, I was kind of ruminating on a potential piece of all the things we got wrong. And you could look at, I remember on every show I did this summer, it was you get asked the question, who are the teams to beat in the AFC? And I'm like, oh, Buffalo, obviously, and some of the other teams. And then whoever comes out of the AFC West is going to be a dominant force because that division looks like easily the best in football. Raiders are 0-3. I mean, Denver's 2-1, but I don't think that's that looks like a thin 2-1. The Chiefs just lost to the Colts. Chargers, I think everybody's hurt. I mean, we got so much stuff wrong, as we do every year. But that's what makes it fun. We get to talk about it all the time. I get to talk about it with wonderful people like you today. And so I am excited to dive into Justin Fields because, like you sort of teased there's a lot to get into.
Yeah, one of the things unexpected, I think, a 2-1 start for the Bears. I like that description for the Broncos, a thin 2-1. I think that describes Chicago.
I mean, do we trust Denver right now? I mean, Nathaniel Hackett needs, when it's week 3 and you have to hire in the sort of voice in your ear to make decisions, not a good start when your fans are counted down the play clock so you don't get a third delay of game penalty in a home game. Not a great sign when you have your quarterback now with his commercial for his Subway sandwich being turned into a Dark Knight meme. which was just incredible work, by the way. Like it seems like a thin 2-1. Although I think tomorrow I am going to get that sandwich. I think I have to try it because he's got banana peppers on it. And I will say, and we'll go way afield here, banana peppers are an elite addition, whether it's on pizza. I love banana peppers on pizza. I put banana peppers on my subs. I grew them last summer. I still have some pickled banana peppers in the fridge. I love banana peppers. But yeah, Broncos are a thin 2-1, I think.
It reminds me of my favorite of the My Brother in Christ memes, where it's like, bro, how do you hate Subway sandwiches? My brother in Christ, you made the sandwich. Like,
right. This is what you wanted. If you don't like it, it's kind of a you problem.
Well, we're off the rails right now.
Seriously.
So let's. I think the listeners are having some issues trusting that we're going to talk about the Bears. And speaking of trust issues, that's the headline of the Mark Schofield, Justin Fields piece. Trust issues are holding Justin Fields and the Bears passing game back. Mark, I guess for the people, I agree with you on your take on this, and I think we're seeing a lot of the same things. But describe what you mean by Justin Fields having trust issues. Because I think on the surface, people might say, oh, does he just not trust his wide receivers because they're bad? But I think it's a little deeper than that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's multiple layers of sort of mistrust here. In some senses, he's not trusting the protection in front of him. And there's a play from Sunday where he's got an opportunity to hit crossing route to St. Brown, like early in the down, and the pocket's pretty good, but he starts to feel a little leak in the sort of left guard A gap, B gap area, and he pulls the ball down, resets, and slides. And by the time he does that, he gives the underneath hold defender, the underneath linebacker in coverage, time to react to the play action and get into the throwing lane. He gives the corner, who had been beaten initially on the break, time to recover. And because he's not sort of trusting the protection in front of him, he doesn't make the throw until later in the down, and it falls incomplete because it's now a tougher throw to make. On the interception to Mooney, for example, he's got a seam route against a too high coverage. He's working against Christian Kirksey, the underneath linebacker, who's what we call sometimes a monument defender, right? He's running straight away from you as a quarterback with his eyes on the receiver, sort of in trail coverage. You've got the two deep safeties. So that seam route, that safety splitter is what you want to throw. And when you see that linebacker running away from you, all he can defend with his eyes on the receiver and away from you is the frame of his body, like shoulder to shoulder, tip of his helmet to his toes. Like his body is all he can really defend because he's not going to get his eyes around. If he does, he gets beat deep. Put the ball just over his head. Like you're taught to throw it quickly. Tim Jenkins did a great video on this play. He talked about hit your hitch step, throw it quickly. As I wrote, like put it over his helmet. Just trust that Mooney's going to make a play on it. Instead, he tries to make the perfect throw to lead him, and it's just off target. It gets intercepted. Now he's getting hit, and the pocket's kind of collapsing, but he tries to do too much with that throw. It was the same thing with the early interception, that Cole Kmet interception. Instead of just putting on him and trusting him that he's going to make a play, he kind of leads him too much, tries to make the perfect throw, and it gets intercepted. And then, look, the 29-yard scramble early in the game, fantastic result. Great result, picks up the first down. You like to see it. He's incredibly athletic. And that's something that he does trust right now. The problem is the process, right? Because you've got sort of a 3-level concept to the right. I really talk about the smash component to it, where you've got the sail route and sort of the hitch that works back to the outside. Both of those routes are open, and he's looking at him. For whatever reason, he doesn't trust himself to make the throw. He doesn't trust himself to sort of let that go. It's 3rd and 9, so he picks it up with his legs, but he's not trusting himself. And so there's a component to it where he's not sort of trusting what's around him, but there's also a component to it, Lorin, where I think he's not sort of trusting himself. Now, I don't know if the coaches have sort of said, look, don't make mistakes. Like, don't turn the ball over. That's all we want from you right now. Don't make mistakes. Our running game is good. Our defense can be good. Like, we could survive as long as you don't turn the ball over. And maybe he's not playing with the confidence that I'd like to see from him. But that's what I'm seeing right now. Is I'm seeing a quarterback that's dealing with some trust issues, both somewhat in what's around him, but also in himself. And that's what I think is holding this passing game back at the moment.
As you gear up for the fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. I'm on LinkedIn. You might be on LinkedIn too. You can add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus their leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. You can read Mark Schofield's Justin Fields analysis at SB Nation. See some clips of the actual plays, the All-22 film that we're talking about there, or find it on his Twitter feed at Mark Schofield. Mark, when you see a quarterback that has this sort of issue right now, how much of that do you think comes down to like processing the play, as it's going? Like he's looking there, but he's looking in the right directions, right? It seems like he's reading the coverage correctly. He's smart, like the Mooney throw, right? You want Darnell Mooney versus a middle linebacker, the Tampa 2 hole in the middle of the field. Like it's not that he's misreading the coverage and doesn't know what's happening on the field, but it's like seeing it, registering it, then deciding, then hitching, then throwing, and like getting through that mental process that's supposed to be really fast, but maybe is just a step slow at that. Like, I guess, is that something we see over time that can be sped up, or can you build that confidence up? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things sort of here. And part of the reason why I sort of talk about it's a lack of trust. I see a lot of my former failed career in that. When a quarterback is afraid to make throws, like that was the book on me. I mean, did you know that adjusted net yards per attempt could be a negative number? Because my career at college was a negative number. I was a bad quarterback. I have no shame in admitting that. But part of the reason I was bad was I was so afraid to make mistakes and be the reason my teams lost that I didn't do the things I needed to do for my teams to win, and you have to play this position aggressive. You have to play this position confident in yourself. You can't play it scared. And can you speed things up? Because I think you're right. There are moments where, like, look, the Mooney interception, to return to that, they're showing him single high. They spin this at the snap, and he reads it perfectly to get to that seam route pretty quickly is good. It's just the next step is, okay, your eyes are in the right place. Like things are in the right place. It's just now get the ball out. And that's sort of like, step one, confirm the coverage. That part of it has been good from him this year. Step two, get the ball out as quickly as you can. That's sort of some of the disconnect. Now, whether that's purely a confidence issue, sort of second half to the process and the decision-making issue, whether it's a combination thereof, that part's a little harder to figure out based just off film. But like you said, for example, on the Cole Kmet interception, a lot of people said, look, St. Brown was open along the seam, on the left side. That's right. But again, they spin to too high. You've got that sort of safety splitter. That's your first option. So making that decision, get into that frame of mind is good. Now, the next step two, getting the ball out quicker. That's what needs to sort of be improved. Why that's happening, I don't know. Can it be improved? Yeah. It just sort of takes some time. And the thing to always remember is, third offensive coordinator in 3 years? Like, that is a process that all younger quarterbacks have to get faster with their eyes, their feet, their decisions, and all that stuff. When you're doing it on your third system in 3 years, it makes it a little bit harder.
Is that something that improves? I know this is a little abstract that we don't have like mathematical answers to, but do you think that's something that improves more in season, game to game, because you just need those live reps of doing that? Or is that something that you can keep working through in the offseason, presumably like with the same offensive coordinator and the same receivers and do it that process? Or does it need to be like a live bullets flying kind of thing?
I mean, I used to be firmly of the mind that you can improve it from watching, you can improve it in the offseason. But I think now the more I sort of think about and study and talk to people around this game, it's an in-season thing too. Like you've got to, there's no way to fully replicate what it is like to make a faster decision when people like Khalil Mack, Aaron Donald, Von Miller are trying to put you in the hospital. Like you can go through VR reps, you can play Madden, you can watch all the film you want. Nothing can replicate what it's like to be in that moment, to make that reading decision with, like you said, the live bullets flying. And so I think it's something that you want to see improve over the course of the season. I get asked this question all the time when I go on shows with teams with younger quarterbacks, and they always ask sort of, what do you want to see? Like, and they always want to push me towards a numbers production standpoint, right? Like, what yards per attempt, what stats do you want to see at the end of the year to make you think that our guy is getting better? And I always say, I just want to see faster decisions and better reads. Like I don't really care the numbers, but if we're talking here, in December, he's seeing the same things, but now the ball is coming out. If we see in December a play like the Mooney interception where he hits and that ball pops out before he gets, say, 15, 20 yards downfield, that's what you want to see. And I almost don't care about the results. I care about the process on these plays, because if the process improves, the results will follow.
How long do you wait for something like this to improve? I mean, obviously it's going to take time, but like, if we look down the line, you get by the end of the year and it's not improving. It's like, okay, well, not great receivers first year with the offense. Okay, you go into year 2, but like eventually, right? Some quarterbacks just don't speed it up, and that is just the reality of who they are. But I guess, and it's different for every quarterback. But how long can you sort of wait? Do you think you're locked in with what it's going to be?
Yeah, Lord, I always sort of subscribe to the Bill Walsh school of thinking, which is third year. Like, if he hasn't figured it out by his third year, like, then yeah, it's really time to worry. And you see some examples of that in the NFL today. Look at Jalen Hurts, look at Tua, look at Josh Allen's third year. I mean, maybe those guys are unicorn one-of-one types.
Well, there's three of them.
But there's 3 of them, so there's 3 of 3, right? So you do the math. But those guys really sort of took strides in that third year. Allen certainly, and where it hurts in Tua's third year right now. And you can see it sort of clicking for them. I mean, I got a piece up on Tua today where you can see from the pocket, much better, more decisive, better with his eyes. And he's doing it on non-RPO plays, whereas last year was really that offense, that scheme was propped up by RPO. Now he's doing it on drop back throws. And so with Fields now, yeah, you're in, the second year, but first year in a new system, second year overall, early in that second year. And so I know there's going to be, if there is an improvement by, say, December, a lot of discussion about CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. Like, we know how this business works. And it certainly gets exacerbated by the fact that you have a new general manager, new head coach. We've seen it before. A new regime comes in and this isn't their guy. They have an early draft pick. They want to go get their guy. But I'm still of the mind that you give a young quarterback 3 years to sort of figure it out. And if we're here, say, next November with Justin Fields, and we're having this same discussion and we're still saying he's not trusting himself, he's not confident, then I think, yeah, that it's really, really, really time to worry. I think it's still early for that right now, but that's just me. I'm just a dude sitting in his basement office. I'm not in the building at Hollis Hall. Dick Butkus is, however, and he's doing great stuff on Twitter. But yeah, I give it 3 years. Walsh gave it 3 years. Walsh certainly knew more about quarterback development than I ever will. If he gave it 3 years, I'm good with that.
I want to go back to the 3 quarterbacks you mentioned there: Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa, and Jalen Hurts. All 3, from early in their career to later on, seemed like the scheme changed a little bit more, especially not as much for Josh, but especially for Tua and Jalen getting different coaches later in their careers. But all 3 also got big investments at wide receiver. Stephon Diggs in Buffalo, you got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in Miami, and then trade for AJ Brown in Philadelphia. How does better receivers equal more confidence in that process? Because you'd think when you're lined up to throw that ball, Justin Fields is seeing open receivers in Chicago. Not that the receivers are great by any means, but whether it's Stephon Diggs there or Equanimeous St. Brown, he's still seeing them open. But is there a psychological sort of thing of oh, well, I know it's Diggs, I know it's Hill, I know it's Brown, so I have just that sort of implicit extra level of confidence that I can believe what I'm seeing more quickly?
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly a trust and chemistry component to the wide receiver quarterback relationship. I wrote about this, last December, January, over Touchdown Wire with, Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow. And I think, that's an interesting trend that we're starting to see with roster construction, which is we know that guys have to get on the same page. We know you need that chemistry between a quarterback and his favorite wide receiver. Rather than wait for that to develop naturally via practice, let's just manufacture it through roster construction. What do you see? You see the Bengals add Jamar Chase. You see, the Dolphins add Jalen Waddle. You see the Eagles go out and get A.J. Brown, who's very close with Jalen Hurts. You see other teams do it too. And so, you look at building that trust, speeding up that relationship between quarterback and wide receiver. That's why I think you're going to see more and more teams go down this path of, can we reunite guys? Can we put that chemistry in place via roster construction rather than relying on building it up via time? And so, would it surprise me if next year they decide we're going to roll ahead with Fields, but we're going to add, a JSN via the draft, somebody that he's played with before, or at least had some time with before. Or we're going to find a way to pair him with guys that he has experience with. Maybe it's just a guy that he works out with in the off season and he's on another team, but he's a free agent. We're going to bring him in. Maybe there's a view towards that, because that chemistry is critical. I mean, in that piece that I wrote about with Chase and Burrow, I pulled quotes from Montana talking about, when he was throwing to Rice, like he knew where he was going to be based on the coverage. Like they didn't have to work out adjustments based on coverage and leverage. They just had that feel for it. And if it's similar to the Washington, if it worked for Joe Montana, I'm going to trust that it could work for Justin Fields. And, I think building that chemistry, you need it. And that could be part of the trust issue right now. And if you add some familiar faces around him, that could be a huge thing for him.
If over time, by year 3, Justin Fields isn't able to speed up that processing and build that really trust of what he's seeing, what do you think the ceiling is for a quarterback like that? I mean, I think what we're seeing right now is not Justin Fields' ceiling, even in this level of processing. It seems to be like a certain level lower. But like are there examples of other quarterbacks that never quite sped it up all the way, but maybe they're certainly not going to be like big time Super Bowl champions, but like, is it journeyman starter, or is it worse than that? Like how far can you go with this type of limitation?
Yeah, I mean, a Tyrod, Daniel Jones, like that kind of tier where it's like you sort of said, like journeyman starter. I mean, I think that's sort of, worst case scenario, because again, we're still early.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, could you sort of get it beyond that? Maybe a Ryan Tannehill type level where you get him into an environment where everything else has to be perfect, and then he can sort of thrive in a play action RPO heavy offense. I think you could probably do something like that. But these are critical issues. These are critical traits. I mean, when I talk to NFL scouts and when I talk to NFL executives and things like that, like the process and speed decision making, like they're like tier 1 level traits that they look at the quarterback position that have to get there. Like you can get around them via scheme, you can get around them via other ways, but it makes life so much easier. I mean, to look at Allen, he sped it up wildly. I mean, from what he was at the end of it in Wyoming to what he is now, from a decision-making processing standpoint, night and day. And so it's fantastic that Fields has elite level traits, because he does. He certainly does. But now you got to take that next step of growth. I would love to be in the room where it happens and basically sit him down right now and rewatch his second game against Clemson at Ohio State, because that was some of the most confident, decisive quarterback play I ever saw from him. And I would just put that in front of him and say, look, Justin, this is why you were a first round pick. This is why you were an early first round pick. This is why guys like me visibly, were in visible pain on live streams when the Bears traded up ahead of the Patriots to draft you, because we wanted you in New England. And, I would sit him in front of that game and say, this is who you are as a quarterback. Let's get back to that. Now, how do we do that? And I think he can get back there. I think we can, by the end of the season, see a better quarterback. But yeah, I mean, as it stands right now, there's work to be done.
Are there things the Bears can do scheme-wise to maybe not accelerate the process, but like just make it easier? Are there certain types of routes or reads that are more that fit what Justin Fields is working through a little bit more and might accentuate what he can still do well, and not rely on him to have to be so like not rely on him to have to process it as quickly? I mean, we see them do a bunch of the rollouts and stuff, and that seems to be partially working, but I don't know. Is there more that they can do, coach, or play calling and scheme wise?
I mean, I think there's always more that you can do as a play caller when you have a younger quarterback. I mean, part of the reason why I bring up that Clemson game is, I would want to sit him down and say, what did you run in this game? Like, and we got to make sure that is in our playbook, that's in our call sheet, that these kinds of plays are in our scripted 10. A lot of them are like vertical, deeper level option routes that adjust based on coverage. And part of that indecisiveness or hesitation or, slowly getting the ball out issue we're seeing now might be because of that, because of Ohio State's offense had routes that converted deeper down the field. It took time for those to develop and for him to make the right decision. And so it was a bit slower process. Now you've got to compress that. And so I think that's something to sort of keep in mind. But they've done some things that I have appreciated as somebody that, reads playbooks and things like that in spare time, which, yeah, I'm a lot of fun at parties. They're doing mirrored route concepts. They're doing, layered route concepts like that smash, the 29-yard run. You had the smash component in the deeper over, the deep corner route that he could look at, sort of that 3-level read. They're doing some half field things. Mirrored route concepts are great because as a quarterback, you just pick your favorite side. On the interception to Moody, because it was a too high coverage, you attack the middle of the field. But if that was single high, you just pick your best side, your best matchup, and you make a read and a throw. Like, you make the decision process easier. Play action, pre-snap movement, motion, shifting, all that sort of stuff. I think those are all things that can help. With the running game that they have, I'd expect to see at some point sort of an even greater reliance on play action, because if teams really sort of start worried about this run game, which has been effective, you might see more opportunities. And that sort of missed St. Brown that we talked about earlier, that was on a play action design. So get to more of that. So I think there are things that they can certainly do, whether it's going back to Ohio State in that Clemson game, whether it's some of the tweaks, but they're also doing some things that I do think put them in a position to be successful.
That was going to be my last question, but you brought some up real quick. I want to sort of circle back to you with play action in particular. I mean, obviously there's great benefit to linebackers thinking it's going to be the run and stepping up, and certainly making the defense have to figure out the play back and forth, whether it's going to be run or pass. But do you think with Fields' situation right now, is there a diminishing return when he has to turn away from the coverage to hand off the ball, and then he has to start processing already, a half second to second into the play? Like, I don't know, you wouldn't want to do no play action, but at some point, what do you think about that idea of should he just have his eyes downfield so he can start the process sooner instead of having to turn and do the play action, but also the play action should be helping also? How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question. It's a great question. I'm glad you brought it up, because you have to do a couple of different things as a play designer. If you're going to run play action, the play action designs have to sort of mirror how you run the football, right? But at the same time, you don't want to constrict that decision-making window. And for example, that St. Brown play that I brought up a couple of times where it's play action, is a little bit late on it. It's an under center play action design. And by sort of turning your back to the defense, like you talked about right there, you're constricting that decision-making window. I like to think about your decision-making window as a quarterback. The second you break the huddle and you start walking to the line of scrimmage, that starts the clock, right? So maybe the 10 seconds that you're walking to the line of scrimmage, you're at the line of scrimmage, to then say 3 seconds after the snap. That's 13 seconds to make a critical decision. If in the middle of that 13 seconds, you think about driving, you get 13 seconds as you're going down the road to avoid an obstacle. But in the middle of that 13 seconds, you close your eyes for 3 or 4. What's your decision-making process going to be like when you open them again? And suddenly that deer that was 15, 1,000 yards down the road is now 100 yards or 20 yards in front of your car. It's not going to be a great decision if suddenly you're like, wait, what? Now we're talking about doing that with the Aaron Donalds, Von Millers, Khalil Macks of the world. It's not an easy process. It's not an easy process. And so, I think, get into perhaps some play action components out of the gun a little bit, some RPO type elements out of the gun where the eyes aren't turned. The eyes are downfield. Now, I haven't done an exhaustive study of the Bears run game to see are there shotgun or RPO type elements. And, you're kind of saying, maybe a little bit. So maybe that's part of the reason, when they line up in the gun, it might be like the Bengals where everybody knows, they're probably going to throw. They don't run out of the gun much, so there is a bit of push and pull to that, because you want the play action concepts to very much mirror the run action concepts. And if you're not doing that, then the team will know. But yeah, that decision-making window is critical. And for a quarterback like Fields right now, who sort of struggled in that decide and get the ball out, removing seconds from that decision-making window might not be the best thing to do for him.
Fascinating stuff. I know we could get into all these.
We could do this for hours, man.
We're back for a long time, but Mark, we both are busy guys, especially you nowadays. I mean, you're all over the map right now with your new gig over at SB Nation. Let everybody know where they can find your work and what kind of things you're working on.
Well, Lord, always great to be with you. SBNation.com. I'm writing a bunch of stuff. Got a piece about Fields that went up on Tuesday. You can check out. Tua went up on Wednesday. I'm writing about baseball. I'm writing about Albert Pujols, Aaron Judge. Writing about Formula One. I wrote about hockey last week, Lord.
Wow.
So yeah, I wrote about Zdeno Chara, Big Z's retirement. So that was a nice little piece. But you can find me on Twitter at Mark Schofield. Lorin, my friend, always great to catch up. Let's do it again soon. Hopefully sooner than we do down at Veets.
Thanks again to Mark Schofield, now from SB Nation, for joining us on the podcast today. If you enjoyed our conversation, if you learned something, make sure you hit that subscribe button to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Come on back tomorrow. We'll talk to Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants for our Crossover Thursday podcast, where we get to know the Bears' upcoming opponent a lot more intimately, kind of get the breakdown from our local expert that covers their team every single day. Then on Friday, we'll put together a game plan for what the Chicago Bears need to do in order to beat the New York Giants this weekend. So it's chock full of great Bears analysis coming for you all week long. Make sure you're making Locked On Bears your first listen each and every day. And if you're looking for your second listen, check out Locked On Giants with Patricia Traina. If you really want to get the scoop on what the Bears are facing this week, all of the biggest storylines coming out of New York. Patricia's great. You'll hear her on tomorrow's podcast, but she does a great job covering that team, and the Per podcast is excellent. If you want that behind-the-scenes, really local-level intel on that Bears opponent, go check out Locked On Giants. Come on back tomorrow for Locked On Bears and your next opportunity to bear down.